Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 327 for the 25th of January 2015. Richard Saunders here with you from the Bay Area, San Francisco. And I think I brought some of the warm weather with me. There are blooms on the trees, flowers are coming out, the days are fine and warm. Something is wrong, folks. I expected to be wrapped up in jumpers and coats and scarves and hats and gloves and all sorts of things. No, I'm getting around in more or less a t-shirt. But at least it's not as muggy as Sydney. But that's enough of the weather report. What's coming up on this week's show? We're going to kick off with an interview with a really interesting fellow, Ketan Joshi. He's going to be talking about energy wind farms and wind farm illness or wind farm disease or wind farmed apparent negative effects from wind farms and things like that. Is it all in the mind? Is it all in the air? Is it all blowing in the wind? Find out with our interview coming up at the top of the show. Following that, it's a week in science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, and I think they've got a different backing track this week. Yes, they've moved with the times, a different backing track, a different music. See what you think of that. And then to round off the show, it's a series of interviews with Maynard, chatting to people at the Australian Skeptics Convention, which was held last November. Sort of a grab bag of people lining up to get into various events, what they think, why they're there, that sort of stuff. And one of the people interviewed by Maynard is none other than Barry Williams. Barry Williams, known to Australian skeptics, he's one of the most famous members of Australian Skeptics. He was the president for many years. He was there right from the kick-off. He's retired now, but he came out of retirement to join us at the convention. Always an interesting man to chat to. And also some extra bits from Michael Marshall and lots of other people too, including some friends of ours from the Victorian Skeptics. That's coming up at the end of the show. And speaking of Maynard, if you go to Maynard.com.au, there are videos and audio clips up there. Recently, the radio station 25.Jan here in Australia celebrated its 40th birthday. And Maynard, for those in Australia, of course, Maynard was a huge part of 25.Jan. So go to Maynard.com.au and look for the 25.Jan videos and audio. Thanks for those people who wrote in saying how much they enjoyed our new reporter, Heidi Robertson, the Raw Skeptic, her report where she visited Mind, Body, Spirit, Mind, Body, Wallet, New Age Fair, whatever you want to call it. And it reminds me, I've been going to these things for years and years and years, as Skeptic Zone listeners will know. And I guess I really did need a fresh set of ears and eyes there to remind me something which is very important about these Mind, Body, Spirit fairs. Is the fact that a lot of people there, purporting to be healers or whatever, simply don't know what they're talking about. They've read junk, they've put their own junk on top of the junk, woo wrapped in woo, they think they know, they have half an idea. Fine, everybody's entitled to their opinion if they have half an idea of half an idea. But I guess the point is these people are imparting this knowledge as if they know how people should handle their health and give advice. And a lot of times they'll charge for it. There's consumer affairs issues with Mind, Body, Wallet festivals. There's safety issues. Ultimately, there are people just peddling nonsense and dangerous nonsense at that. Maybe over this year, 2015, we'll look more into that aspect of the Mind, Body, Wallet fairs. Maybe they've been getting away with it for far too long. We'll see. Another thing that struck me this week, visiting the United States and looking at the TV news, the measles outbreak, which seems to have started in Disneyland, of all places, is making the news. And one of the points being made is that once the United States was considered measles-free, and I guess the work of the anti-vaxxers over years is really starting to show now, with outbreaks of measles, people coming in from other countries to the United States who have measles, unvaccinated kids running around. It's astonishing. Measles, whooping cough. What's next? We've been fighting the anti-vaxxers for many years on the Skeptic Zone and the Australian Skeptics, as you know. And I don't want to say that we're not making any progress, because we really are. We really are. But the opposition is mobilised. They're effective, unfortunately, so we just have to keep on fighting. And it's people like Dr. Raichi, Joe Alabaster, Heidi Robertson, who are really doing their bit to fight these peddlers of disease. And some of them really are peddlers of the disease. They want children to get sick. They want children to have measles and whooping cough and all these other horrible diseases. Next week, we're going to have an update on the Tenpenny tour, or lack thereof, of Australia. The last thing I've heard is it looks like the tour has been cancelled due to pressure from the forces of reason, but we'll see what happens in the coming week. And Joe Alabaster should be able to give us a little update next week. Well, that's the rant over for now. I'm going to run upstairs, grab that lovely root beer and ice out of the fridge because it's a warm day. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me on the line all the way from Australia, wow, imagine that, it's Ketan Joshi. Hello.
Hi, Richard.
How is it over there in Australia?
It's absurdly hot. I walked outside and my arms melted off, and no, I have no arms.
That's what actually, for the benefit of our listeners, we're Skyping at the moment, and you're right, you have no arms. I can see no arms.
That's true.
It's ironic because I've come all the way here to California to what I assumed would be a lovely, crisp winter, only to find that there are flowers blooming and I'm walking around in a T-shirt. I don't know what's going on. I'm glad you could give me some time today, because we're talking about things warming up. We're talking about the environment. And one of your great areas of interest is renewable energy, which sort of ties in rather nicely, wind farms, this sort of thing. Can you tell me a bit about your background and what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, so I did a science degree, and that was actually focusing on neuro and psychology, and after I finished, I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I ended up in the renewable energy industry doing data analysis, and I did data analysis for about 2 years, and now I've ended up doing research and communications for a wind energy company called Infigen Energy. But yeah, I've been a science-loving skeptic my whole life, and it's really fun to apply that to the industry in which I work.
And was it last year or the year before you actually gave a really great talk to a Sydney Skeptics dinner meeting about a topic which I find really interesting because, and we'll get to this, as you pointed out in your talk, this is hardly a new topic, and we're talking about, what is it, renewable energy sickness or wind turbine sickness, or what's the expression?
The name for that phenomenon was coined in 2009 by actually an American pediatrician, and she called it wind turbine syndrome.
Syndrome, right.
But, I mean, it gets called different things all the time. Like, it's kind of just a catch-all term for a bunch of generic symptoms experienced by people who are within 10 to 30 kilometres of any wind farm of any size anywhere in the world. So it's not really a precise definition. It's very broad.
And how does this syndrome manifest itself?
The attribution within the theory, within kind of the construct of the theory, is that it comes about due to inaudible noise. So not sounds that you consciously perceive, but an invisible, inaudible kind of, it's everywhere at the same time, and it's really low frequency noise. So it's below the threshold that our ears can detect, and they call it infrasound. That's the technical name for it, and it's below 20 hertz, which is really ridiculously low. For you to hear that, it has to be really, really loud. Right. So if you ever wound down the car window, when you're on a highway and you get that kind of repetitive thumping noise, that's actually in the infrasonic range. But it's just so loud that you can perceive it. So when I say it's not really able to be perceived, it is, but it has to be stupidly loud. Yeah.
Okay, so normally, in the day-to-day situations with wind farms especially, you can't hear it. I mean, if you're close to a wind turbine on the wind farms, I haven't been, what noise would you expect to hear?
Basically, you hear a couple of things. If the turbine's shutting down or starting up, you can hear a bit of like mechanical whirring and stuff like that from inside the hub. If it's just going normally, what you hear is kind of a very sort of like gentle whooshing noise as it goes past the tower. And that's actually when the blade goes past the tower, the air compresses.
Right.
And that just kind of makes it like this, like you can kind of look it up online. You know, there's a lot of people who have gone to wind farms expecting like this cacophony of insane, like painful death orchestra coming from the turbines. What you just get is like this, and it's pretty quiet basically.
Yeah. And once you start heading away from a wind turbine, there'll be a down the road, not a far distance, I imagine, you simply wouldn't hear anything at all.
Yeah, we did this a couple of days ago with some guests who were at the wind farm. They wanted to hear the sound of the wind farm from 500 meters away. What I mentioned before, wind turbine syndrome is meant to be active, between 10 and 30 kilometers, which is pretty huge.
Yeah.
500 meters away, we couldn't perceive the noise. There was this cow, I think it was sick or something, but it was just going nuts as well. So it might have been masking the noise, but
well, maybe the cow's got the wind turbine syndrome.
Yeah, it could actually. That's we're going to edit that bit out because we don't want people to know that the cows are getting wind syndrome.
Yes, we better keep that. We better keep that bit quiet. So basically speaking, when you're close to one of these things, you'll hear something.
Yeah.
You move away, and then it's simply whatever sound is generated just drops below the human threshold.
But basically, most of the noise that you get from mechanical noise and that whooshing noise almost always gets drowned out by the wind itself. Wind is quite noisy, particularly when it collides with something, so like a building or a tree. And generally, people tend to live in buildings or they live near trees. So the noise that most people get near wind farms is from trees and the atmosphere colliding with your house.
Which you would hear regardless.
That's why when you're testing a wind farm, you have to have what's called on-off testing. So when they're commissioned, the government says basically you have to test the noise of your wind farm because they want to make sure that you're within the regulation. It's got some good scientific principles behind it in that there's a control. There's a time period in which you switch the wind farm off and you go, let's measure that background noise. And then you switch the wind farm back on and you go, okay, well, what's the difference? You subtract the two and that's how you determine the noise output of the wind farm.
Right. I must admit, when I first heard about this sort of thing, it did strike me as odd because you'd think, great, wind farms doing something for the environment, clean energy, all the rest of it. There are so many people railing against what we might call more traditional forms of energy, and probably justly so, oil and coal and all that sort of thing. But then we get people railing against wind farms. Most fascinating things I learned from you a year or so back when you gave a talk was this sort of resistance to this sort of new technology goes back quite a way, doesn't it?
It goes back a very long way. I was actually Professor Simon Chapman at Sydney University brought this to my attention. There's a paper in the British Medical Journal from I think it was actually the 1800s, if not after that. I actually don't remember when the telephone was invented. I should know that. But whenever that was invented, there was a full letter in the BMJ about the health risks of landline telephones.
Wow.
And the list of symptoms is really one of the most fascinating things I've read because it's almost identical to many of these contemporary syndromes. Yeah. That we hear about. It's a very similar list every single time. It's something. It's nausea, it's headaches, sleeplessness, anxiety, kind of like this just feeling of panic, along with this kind of really visceral fear that you just get in the pit of your stomach, and that translates into a lot of actual real symptoms. When you're anxious like that, you do tend to get more sick. That's a relatively well established kind of outcome of being worried about a prevalent piece of technology that's near you all the time.
And something new and something you're not used to, maybe. Well, that's the invention of the telephone. That's interesting. I didn't know that. But let's advance it to not that long ago when mobile phone towers started popping up. And this is a very interesting point that you pointed out as well.
It has all the same features, really. And that's kind of ubiquity. It's everywhere, right? And they're really visible. So when telegraph wires went up, they were really visible too. And now we're getting those you've seen those cell phone towers on top of buildings with the white, sort of transmission array. They often have to put them on top of residential buildings. When I was actually researching that talk, I found some interesting articles about it, and I tweeted them just as kind of like, hey, check out this interesting, isn't it interesting that people are worried about this? And when I tweeted it, a bunch of active groups started responding to me saying, thank you for sharing our story. There's this planned Telstra tower on top of our building. We appreciate that you're, raising awareness of that. And I was like, I think you've got the wrong idea. I actually did have a good chat with them because, it's interesting to kind of get an idea of where they're coming from, why are they scared, and kind of drilling down into what their fears are. And much of their fear comes from having no control over the development of these things. I reckon if you did a survey with those people who were worried about landline telephones, hundreds of years ago, or 100 years ago, you would probably get the same thing. They're like, well, I'm angry and I'm freaked out because I can't do anything about it, and I'm peeved about that.
And it gives them something if they're not feeling well, or some people are prone to, hypochondria, I guess. It gives them a reason.
When someone is sick and they don't know what's causing it, and they go to a doctor and the doctor's like, I don't know. We've got no idea. And then someone else comes along and says, well, I know what's wrong with you. It's this particular thing that's near you. Yeah. It's quite a relief. I can probably, so there was some news that came out this week, which I basically, it was like a 490-page report. And it's a really fascinating development with this whole wind turbine syndrome thing, because it's a study that involved 6 residents from 3 separate households at a wind farm called the Cape Bridgewater Wind Farm. We've sort of seen stuff like this before, where they'll survey a select, really small number of non-representative residents, and then take those results to be representative of the wider population. Which, as you and I know, that's not a particularly good scientific method, right? Yeah. Because it's selection bias. But the unique thing about this study is that it was actually commissioned by the wind farm operator. And so what they did was they said to these residents had been complaining for a really long time, and they'd commissioned acoustic studies from, just basically a randomly chosen acoustic consultant, and they could never find anything, right? They were just like, look, we've studied this so many times, and we can't find anything different about this wind farm. Yet the residents keep complaining. Residents, you guys choose your acoustician. We're not going to, because you want to, you're not happy with our choice of acoustician, so you guys choose who does the study, and they did. The man who did the study has basically done work for anti-wind groups before. Oh, yeah. This study that he did is, in my opinion, a pretty poor study, but there's 2 really important stories here. One is that he didn't do very good science. But the second really important thing is that a letter was written by those residents, right? And they published it on the website of this group called the Warburg Foundation. Now, the Warburg Foundation are an organisation who are basically dedicated to propagating the wind turbine syndrome theory to communities near wind farms, right? They're often described in the media as an anti-wind group. And I would pretty much concur with that, in that they focus on basically regulating wind farms out of existence. Right. They published this statement from these residents who were in this study. It's probably the most interesting part of it, because the residents say, we are relieved, we're happy, because this study tells us what we thought all along, that the wind farms were causing our symptoms. So I didn't mention what the results of the study were. What he did was he got the residents to fill in diaries. Oh, yeah. He took measurements from the wind farm at the same time. So he measured noise, and he measured something that he invented for the study called sensation. Sensation is what we were just mentioning before with the symptoms experienced with telephone lines decades ago and mobile phone towers and all that sort of stuff. It's nausea, it's headaches, it's anxiousness, it's unease, in your stomach, that sort of thing. Yeah. He heralded it as this is a new type of acoustic study, and it's never been done before. And it has been done. Basically, he found that there was no correlation between noise reports. There was no correlation between low-frequency noise and noise reports. But what he did find, there was a slight increase in severity in sensation reports during periods of higher power output, but not noise output. Which is, I won't go too far into it because we really don't have the time, but basically my first instinct on reading that was, what do you mean by correlation? Is that a statistically significant correlation? What kind of measures did you use? And there's a quote in an article that just came out yesterday or the day before where he just said, oh, look, what I did was I looked at when they were reporting impacts, and I just worked backwards from there and found noise output that correlated with that. It's just That's not great science.
Oh, boy.
And he says that in an article, right? Like, I'm not paraphrasing. That, this is in an article in the Australian that was published on Thursday by their environment editor Graham Lloyd. And he also says, well, sure, they reported sensations when the wind turbines were off, but the wind turbines were vibrating due to the wind, and that's why they were reporting sensations in their diaries during the shutdown period. Which, again, right, like you think about the scientific method there, and you think about what a normal scientific study would do. They would say, well, that seems to be a confounder, because perhaps all of the sensation reports were from vibrating wind turbines. Or something else. We're measuring something else. We think we're measuring a correlation between wind farm noise and these diary reports, but it's something completely different.
Right.
So again, there's a lot wrong with the study, but those are probably the two key parts. But the residents looked at this study and they were like, thank God, like we've been told that we're making it up and we've been told that we're liars, and finally we get something that tells us that our sickness, our health problems are caused by this thing, and we're happy. What they say in this letter is like, thank you, for taking the time, for spending like hours and weeks and days just talking to us, right? And when I was reading that, the thing that immediately sprang to my mind was homeopathy, because the thing I've sort of noticed with homeopathy is people who undergo, and actually a close relative of mine is currently taking homeopathic treatments, and I was talking to her about what is it that attracts you to it, and she's like, it's that they take the time to listen to me, and they don't say that I'm wrong. They just kind of like sit there and they listen, and they kind of tell me that I'm right,
Yeah.
And they tell me that my belief in homeopathy isn't misplaced. They say, you've made the right choice here. You're not deluded. You're not wrong about this. They're basically agreeing with them, right? So this is what really stands out to me with this recent study, is that what happened is someone found a group of people with a belief and reinforced that belief.
Very comforting.
And I'm content that they reinforced that belief with not very good science.
Yeah, well, I mean, these people really didn't need convincing before. We've come across this sort of people. It's like homeopathy. They don't need convincing. They know what's right. But when someone confirms what they already know to be true, then they're more set in it. We also look at things along the similar lines here. We have the telephone, the worries with that. We've got the wind turbines, the cell phones, but smart meters too. And you've discovered that this is similar. Now you have a name for this.
I called it everything syndrome, yeah. And it's I actually intend to basically put all this into a paper or something and I don't know, publish it somewhere if I can. I think smart meters are unique in that just the raw passion behind it is unparalleled. Like, I mean, people are passionate about the wind turbine syndrome thing as well, and they're passionate about the cell phone thing too. But I don't know why, but the smart meter thing just gets people furious in an unmatched way. There are some YouTube videos of protests that are held outside local the offices of parliamentarians in Victoria, and the emotion behind some of these protests is really, really strong, and I'm actually a bit baffled as to why it's different for smart meters. And I suppose my guess is simply that it's closer to people's homes, right? Like
I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. It's in their home, and they've been told this is making them sick. Yeah, I can understand some people would get incredibly passionate about it, especially if they think they're getting sick or their family's getting sick.
Yeah, and it's a similar thing, right? So if it's a government mandated rollout, so if the government says we want wind turbines across our lands, and then the government, they kind of introduce a scheme to do that, then there's going to be more chance of people, strangely, it doesn't seem like an intuitive thing, but somehow there's a link there where people are more likely to feel ill because, and attribute it to the presence of that thing. In Victoria, the rollout of smart meters was mandatory, and in New South Wales, it's going to be optional. And my guess is that you'll get a much lower rate of people complaining about smart meter syndrome, basically, in New South Wales than you will in Victoria. And that's kind of why I want to, put something together and get it in writing. Like, this is my guess. I bet you won't get the same type of groups. In the Victorian election, there was a group called People Power No Smart Meters, and they ran, I can't remember how many votes they got. It wasn't a huge number. I don't think they got a seat in the Senate. On their website, what they were basically saying as part of their policy is every single human being who lives in a residence in Victoria should have the right to veto any technology within a reasonable distance of their home. And that's anything, right? Like, that wasn't limited to smart meters. So if someone wants to build, I don't know, a bus stop with an LCD display in it, that would fall under the heading of technology, right? So you could say, nah.
Yeah, but I bet they mobilise themselves by talking on their cell phones, though.
I think there's a caveat on their website that, like, this is all done through Ethernet cables.
No.
Not Wi-Fi. But I actually really relish, taking time to just read what they're saying and listen to the kind of things that they put online, the videos, because it gives us a really, really important insight into how people react to technology.
Well, the new energy push, it's not an easy road. When I was a kid growing up in the 70s, I remember seeing bumper stickers that would say, solar energy, the way of the future. Well, I'm in the future. I'm still waiting for it. I know it'll come, and I know it'll be a good thing. It's just taking a long time. Listen, Ketan, where can people find out more about what you're up to?
I've got a blog that is just called Some Air, or etwasluft.blogspot.com.au. I don't know why I chose a German name, because no one can get the name when I say it.
We have listeners in Germany. It's all right. Etwas Luft. Okay.
It's probably a lot better to just go to my Twitter feed, which is Ketan J0, at Ketan J0, and or you can just Google my name. That's usually better, because Google will tell you everything about me.
All right. So those people out there who are afraid of the internet and Wi-Fi and smart meters and wind turbines and telephones and heaven knows what, run to the blog and have a look. Well, Ketan, thank you for taking the time out today in hot, stinking Sydney, Australia.
No problems. Thank you, Richard.
Summer in Australia. The sand, the sea, the surf, the heat, the scepticism. Yes, the Great Ocean Road Skeptics from the far south coast of Australia are bringing back the Surf Coast Summer Skeptic Camp for the 4th year in a row this year. This is a grassroots skeptical event in a small community hall in Aireys Inlet, one of the most gorgeous seaside villages on the Great Ocean Road. It's even got a lighthouse and everything. This is a free event and lunch is provided. It's an easy day trip from Melbourne, or you can make the most of the beautiful location and spend the whole weekend soaking up the natural beauty and world-famous beaches. You can join us for a relaxing dinner with other skeptics at the local pub when the Skeptic Camp is done. Details can be found on our Eventbrite booking page, or you can find our listing on Skeptic Groups of Victoria Facebook page. If you have a talk you'd like to give or any other questions, just use the Contact Organiser button on the booking page to send an email and we'll be back in touch with you. In previous years, we've had group discussions, videos and talks on topics ranging from alternative medicine to local UFO mysteries. So why not wander over to our Eventbrite booking page at Surf Coast Summer Skeptic Camp 4 and let us know you're coming. We look forward to welcoming you on the 28th of February in Aireys Inlet.
Be Reasonable is a podcast from the Merseyside Skeptic Society, hosted by Michael Marshall. In each monthly interview, we'll examine beliefs from outside of the mainstream, exploring how those views are constructed and what evidence people feel supports their case. In the latest episode, I speak with Dr. Leo Rebello, a homeopath and author who argues that HIV doesn't exist and that AIDS should be treated with homeopathy and yoga.
So when I say we treat AIDS patient, it is a combination of diet, yoga, homeopathy, herbs, psychological medicine, dance therapy, counseling. All that goes into it. We don't stop at giving antiretroviral, and antiretroviral, which are known carcinogens.
Hear what Leo has to say, as well as listening to back issues of the show, by visiting merseysideskeptics.org.uk/podcasts or searching Be Reasonable on iTunes.
The Skeptic Zone is brought to you by Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. Visit drbobsquiz.wordpress.com and see if you can match wits with Dr. Bob.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. 2014 was a massive year for science, so let's look back at the year's top 5 science stories with a little help from our friends at the AusSMC. At number 5, we had a sneak peep into the origins of vertebrate sex. And they probably did it sideways. 385-million-year-old fossilised fish called antiarchs were found to copulate in what could best be described as a bizarre square dance-like display. The male had bony claspers that transferred sperm, which clamped onto small paired bones on the female, which helped dock the male organ in a sideways position. The largest dinosaur ever discovered is our number 4 story for 2014. The fossils of a titanosaur sauropod, or long-necked dinosaur, were found in Argentina by a farmer. The ultra-mega dinosaur lived 100 million years ago. Its head could have been lifted to around 20 metres above the ground, and the whole beast would have been 40 metres long, clocking in at 77 tonnes, as much as 14 African elephants. 2014 may go down as the year in which major countries started taking climate change seriously. In October, an EU agreement aimed to cut carbon emissions by 40% of 1990s levels by the year 2030. And in November, both the US and China, the world's 2 largest carbon emitters, agreed to take action on controlling their carbon outputs, with the US pledging to cut 2005 carbon emission levels by 26 to 28% within the next 10 years. At number 2 is the landing of the Philae probe on a speeding comet. This 10-year-long project involved a 500 million-kilometre race to have the probe and a comet meet in the vastness of space. The probe successfully landed on the comet and detected organic molecules before its batteries died. And the number 1 science story for 2014 is the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. The outbreak has infected over 17,000 people, of whom over 6,000 have died. The Ebola virus causes impaired kidney and liver function, diarrhoea and dehydration, and uncontrollable bleeding. The United Nations, countries around the world and non-government organisations are still working to contain the outbreak and treat the infected. That's our top science stories for 2014. I'm Paul Willis, and we'll catch you here next week.
Hi, this is Colm Ryan from Cork Skeptics in the Republic of Ireland here. Our next event, Skeptics in the Castle, features Michael Marshall recounting his ongoing adventures in the world of pseudoscience. Michael needs no introduction to skeptics. He is the organiser of the QED conference in the UK, as well as the Vice President of the Merseyside Skeptics Society and the Project Director of the Good Thinking Society. He regularly speaks with proponents of pseudoscience for the Be Reasonable podcast, as well as co-hosting the Skeptics with a K podcast. His talk begins at 8 p.m. on Thursday, the 5th of February. The venue is Blackrock Castle Observatory near Cork City. It's free to attend and all are welcome. We look forward to seeing you there.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
As you know, the venue is the Chatswood Club, Richard,
Yes.
but I didn't expect the line to be this far out the door.
Well, we're walking and walking and walking and walking, and there are still people queued up to get inside. It's quite extraordinary, man.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Hello, I can see you're at the very end of the line here. How's it going?
Good.
What's your name?
Ren.
And
Doug, how you doing?
And you're here for the whole conference or just for tonight's show?
Tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, tonight and tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So you obviously, have you been skeptics for long? What's your skeptical history? Oh, this is Richard Saunders, by the way. He's my dad. He's my dad.
Just started listening to the SGU about 2 years ago. And yeah, so we're mainly here to see them.
Okay.
Excellent.
Did you write any questions down for them and send them on to George?
No.
Okay.
I'll let everyone else do that.
Okay. And what's your specialist area of skepticism? Is there something that really annoys you that you think, I'm glad I'm a skeptic?
Health issues, probably, because, having a young daughter, she's only 2, and just making sure we're getting all the right information around that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Have you ran into any anti-vax parents?
Not yet. Well, I haven't.
Not really, but reluctant vaxxers, yes.
What about the other one that seems to be quite rife? It's those amber teething rings. Have you met anyone who's really into them? Because I don't think there's any science to back that up.
Our neighbour does that, and also the what's she taking, pill form?
Oh, the placenta.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And what's that supposed to do? Just make you generally healthier, is it?
Makes you happier, makes you less likely for the postnatal depression.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But the amber teething rings, that whole thing seems, and particularly since they're usually made out of plastic too.
Yeah, it's a bit odd.
Look, actually, we'd found the Skeptic Zone listener. We knew they were there somewhere. What's your name?
It's me. I'm Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. How long have you been a Skeptic Zone listener?
Quite a while back. Actually, I remember vaguely watching a video one right back at the start. How long
It's pretty old.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I stayed with it that whole time, but I kind of came back. But quite a while, yeah.
And of course, we went to the Ryde Cemetery and we did a bit of a ghost tour there. How did you find that?
That was really interesting. I was thinking about whether I would go or not, and even though I'm pretty sceptical about all these things, there's still something about it, and I don't know if I could.
It scared the poopy out of me. In fact, listening back to it when that girl Jess said that there was a 6-year-old kid next to her holding her hand, I had to stop listening to my own story. I couldn't even listen to it.
I think you walked away at that point.
I did. I made an excuse about having to go poo and fall down or something like that. I just made any excuse and got out of here because it really rattled me.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it's all just weird.
Well, there's 3 options. She's either experiencing something of the paranormal, which I couldn't witness, and was a pretty awesome thing. She was either making it up or she was suffering a delusion. None of those 3 things am I prepared for.
Well, might be all 3.
Well, yeah. So, but it was pretty serious stuff to be there in the middle of the night, wasn't it, Richard?
It was indeed, but I'm glad we did it.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I'll do it again in a hurry. And I wouldn't play the Ouija board. Richard played the Ouija board, and I wouldn't talk to him, did it?
No, went silent.
Yeah.
I did that thing as a kid where you at a slumber party where you put 2 fingers under the people under someone and try and lift them up. And
did it work?
I actually can't remember, but I'm assuming it didn't. Otherwise, I would have remembered.
Okay. Yeah, because I have heard of people doing that and it working.
Well, it depends how many people you have, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. And what are you looking forward to this weekend as part of the big Skeptical weekend?
A bit of a break from the family. I've left the kids at home.
Oh, right.
And just everything, just meeting all the people that I listen to so much. I've got a whole list of questions for people, and I've broken it down by who I'm going to ask.
Well, they're all in here, and you better sign in so the line doesn't get any longer. And if you've got any questions for me, please come and ask me.
Will do.
Okay. Pretty good. Yes, can I have a chat about what's going on? Look, it's a relatively quiet oasis of scepticism over here in the corner. Who have we got?
I've got Terry Kelly, the Vice President of the Victorian Skeptics.
Now, you'd be having a big relaxed one with your feet up because you've got nothing to do with this.
No organising this time, but we're getting a bit nervous because we might have to do it again in a couple of years. You never know.
Look, what was the thing that sort of was difficult at the last minute for a conference like this? Because everyone who has one, there's always some weird thing that happens at the last minute and you've got to run around like a nut.
Yeah, we had problems with accommodation for some of the guest speakers. For once, we didn't actually go to the hotels, and 2 or 3 of our star performers were accommodated in accommodation, didn't have air conditioning, and it was hot.
Right.
So that happened right in the middle of the convention. But yeah, and look, registration was a problem for us because we did the registration on the Friday night. So getting people in the door.
Well, that's a problem
slow.
Here tonight, but it's not a skeptical problem. It's the club's the problem. There's only 2 books people can sign to get in.
We were just talking that it's really fabulous that there's so many people. It's a little bit sad that it's so hard to get a drink.
Yes.
We had
a lot of thirsty people here.
A lot of thirsty people, yeah. But it's fabulous that, there are people catching up with old friends.
Yes.
And there are people meeting new people. And I suppose the more drinks they have, the more new people they'll meet, which is why it's a shame it's so hard to get a drink.
Yeah, that's pretty true. And we've got one of my favourite teachers from the Victorian system here. How are you, sir?
Thanks, Maynard. Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Could you let us know who you are again and which school you're at now? Are you at the same school?
I'm Adam Van Langenberg, still at McKinnon Secondary College in Melbourne. That's right.
And how's your skeptical group there going?
Skeptical group's going really well. Passing through a lot of different students coming in, a lot of new faces turning up at the start of every year, which is really nice to see.
And what sort of subjects have they got interested in lately? Is there something they've been interested in that's different from the regular movement?
We've been spending a bit of time lately actually talking about the differences between science and pseudoscience, which I found just this very short little image on the internet that had a few key points, and I thought, this will entertain the kids for about an hour at lunchtime, and 2 months later we are still talking about that exact same thing.
Wow. And what is the simple definition that you gave them?
I don't think I had a simple definition for it. It was more of if it does these things, it's probably pseudoscience. If it does these things, it's probably science.
Oh, okay. And have many of these students gone on to be in the Young Skeptics group of Melbourne and that sort of thing?
I think so, yeah. A few of the students sort of in the more senior years who have left. I know there are a couple definitely who have gone to join on a Melbourne uni and join I forgot the name, Rational. I think it's a Rational Society.
Right.
Yeah. So a few of my kids have gone on to do that and on to bigger and better things, which is always nice to see. Leave me in the dust.
And what's the thing that still excites you about it? Because being a teacher, it's a lot of the same. How do you make it fresh for yourself all the time?
Having a really faulty memory, so every time I do everything, it feels new to me.
A goldfish memory.
Yeah, exactly right. But I'm used to that as a maths teacher. Every classroom, the kids have forgotten what I told them the day before, so I could probably just do the exact same talk every single fortnight and the kids will get the same amount out of it.
And what are you looking forward to this week, Adam? Is there one speaker or one topic you really want to get your teeth into?
I'm looking forward to having a weekend off and just being able to put my feet up and not have to worry about anything for a while, to be honest. But no, there are a lot of things I'm looking forward to, hearing Dick Smith speak, seeing the Skeptics Guides presentations there, and the individual one, Dr. Novella's at the end of it. I think I'm speaking just before Stephen Novella, so I don't know if that's going to make it easier for him or worse for him.
A lot of people are looking forward to hearing Adam van Lankenberg speak.
Well, there you go, yeah.
Thank you, at least one, Terry, thanks.
Did you bust the students on a bowler? Did you look at the skepticism angle to a bowler when that was going around?
Yeah, we talked about it just a little bit more about the the representation of it in the media and the difference between just believing everything you see on the TV and how can you go and do some actual research into it yourself.
Okay. Well, look, you have a good time and I hope your speech goes well.
Yeah, thanks very much.
I'm predicting standing ovation.
That's, look, if there's anything less, I'll be disappointed, I think.
Look, here's someone I haven't seen for a while. Who have we got here?
Barry Williams is my name.
And what are you up to today, Barry? How many of these have you been to now?
Well, I'm here as a volunteer. I was running the Skeptics for a number of years, and I attended 27 of these on the trot. And I retired about 5 years ago and decided just to drop in occasionally, but they needed somebody to give them a bit of a hand, and I thought, I live locally, so I'll come up and give them a help.
Yeah, I hadn't seen you around for a little while, Barry, and last time I spoke to you, you talked about your early history with the Skeptics movement and how you thought that sometimes the interest in paranormal divided upon gender lines sometimes, like guys tend to go for UFOs while women tend to go for the more spiritual.
That was my observation over the years, yeah. And I guess that's similar in real life too. The sort of more technical things, men tend to be more interesting. Women tend to be more interested in the emotional things, I suppose. Now I'll probably get castigated for that, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just the way people are.
Now, is there some new woo that's come around that you haven't seen before? Because you've just about seen it all. Is there something new you've seen?
Whoever said there's nothing new under the sun, I think it might have been Shakespeare, was quite right. It might have even been the Bible. But, look, they come and go, and they slightly different guises, some of these things come in, but by and large, the same old fundamental beliefs keep coming back. They get knocked on the head for a while, then they come back again, you can guarantee it. I expect possibly spoon bending might be due for a comeback anytime soon.
Do you think it all gets back to people wanting something for nothing? They want to lose weight without doing anything. They want to be smarter without going and doing any more learning, that sort of thing?
No question about that, yeah, sure. I mean, it's a quite understandable thing. I mean, I think as a species we're fairly idle. We'd like to be idle. And, those of us who are fortunate enough to live in societies like ours get a lot more idleness than perhaps if we were living in Africa or somewhere like that, where you have to actually work pretty hard to stay alive. And we get accustomed to that, and then we start wanting more and more things for nothing.
So you've been well and truly retired for a while now. How do you fill up your days?
Well, I do a lot of reading, catching up with the reading I just didn't have time to do before. I've got a lot of skeptical books I'm reading, and I'm reading a lot more fiction these days than I used to. And I've got a couple of grandsons, one of whom's just started doing a PhD and one of whom's just passed his HSC, so they're not little kids, but they still take as much looking after from old grandfather, like driving them here, driving them there. Yeah. That doesn't change.
And what's your advice to them when it comes to thinking critically? What's the first step you should take?
Well, I always tell them, never believe anything you hear without a reason. If somebody and make sure the reason isn't that you actually want to believe it. Make sure there's some good reason for believing what claims people make, and I think that stands people in good stead anywhere. These boys are pretty smart, pretty level-headed, but like all young men, they fall for the zeitgeist of the age, if you like, and they tend to believe in some ratbag things that I wouldn't believe in. But then at their age, I used to believe in other ratbag things. So that's the way it goes.
Thanks, Barry. Enjoy your... this will be your 28th convention you'd been to then, will it?
Yeah, I think so. I really haven't kept count, but it was around about that, yeah. I think this is about the 30th, and I've been to all except a couple, so...
Well, you go nuts here today, Barry.
I will, yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Look, I'm here with a fan of the Skeptic Zone. What's your name, sir?
Enrique.
And how long have you been listening to the Skeptic Zone for?
8 to 10 years, it's hard to tell anymore, but quite a while.
Now, what is it about it that you kind of like? I guess it's an Australian show for a start, but...
It's Australian. It helps me keep up to date with what's going on as a nicely concentrated resource for Australian skeptical things, and overall it's just very interesting, the format that Richard has managed to put together. Overall, I've just had a great time listening to it.
Now, what do you think of us going to the cemetery the other day?
I will admit I'm a bit behind because I've been hooked on a new thing that I'm catching up with, but then I will catch up, I promise.
Oh, that's okay, because the thing is they sit there forever, so you can take your time.
Yes, that is one of the brilliant things about it.
Now, are you a commuter that likes to listen on the way to work, or you're in the shower kind of guy before you go to bed?
When doing the dishes mainly, and when I'm driving and the kids aren't in the car.
Oh, okay. And how do the kids feel about it?
Daddy, I don't like this story, turn it off.
Okay, well, you go, shh. You can turn it off when you're older.
Yeah, I try, but then they just get louder and start playing louder games, and there's no point, so I give up. They win.
Oh, and what's your favourite kind of woo? What do you hate the most? What are the one where you go, that damn woo, and you shake your fist?
Acupuncture, because my boss has an acupuncture clinic. And I have to deal with it at work, including her at one point coming up to me with a couple of acupuncture needles when I had a particularly stuffy nose. My reaction, she thought I was scared of the needles. It was more of, I just don't want to have to deal with this.
Yes, okay.
It was a very uncomfortable and difficult situation.
Yeah, because she'll say, but it's proven, and you'll go, but it's not.
I avoid the subject. She's one of the two directors of the company.
Oh, okay, yes, well...
So,
yes.
No.
Yeah, a bit of tact there, I can understand.
Very much so. I love where I work. I just don't like that one aspect of it. It makes it very difficult.
Well, enjoy the rest of the conference.
Same. Thank you very much.
Look, I'm here with Mr. Marsh, and he was losing fans at a rate of knots last night. Now, Mr. Marsh, you were having a big sceptical discussion about television that could have gone horribly wrong for your entire career last night in Chatswood.
That's true. I made some appalling nerd faux pas because I was pointing out that I think Game of Thrones is appallingly written and has no characters, and the plot does not really progress so much as kind of plod on, and he has no idea where he's going. And then...
I usually refer to that show as No Pants Monarchs.
Yeah, if it was called that, I could go with it, because at least it's kind of putting out there exactly what it's all about. But don't pretend that there's this kind of well-thought-out story arc that's coming. You've no idea where it's going, mate. You're just trying to milk it. And then I pointed out that the people who compare Breaking Bad to being some Shakespearean tragedy is just offensive. It is a terrible, terrible show with one-dimensional characters who don't have any... And I think I lost pretty much everyone who's ever listened to any show I've ever done around that table.
Did they cut you any slack and just nod, or did they go straight for your throat?
I would say it's not the slack that I was worried about them cutting. It was definitely the throat. That's where I was worried about the cutting taking place.
So what were you holding up, some show like The Doctors or Emmerdale, one of the other great products of the UK output?
You know, I don't think anybody who is listening to this, wherever this goes, will have heard of Emmerdale, and that is frankly a good thing, because Emmerdale is one of the most appalling things we've ever committed, one of the most appalling acts we've ever committed in Britain, and we were colonial powers. You know, Emmerdale is definitely the top of the most appalling things we've ever done.
No, hang on, wasn't there a show that was worse than that called Silverado or something that was made out of Scotland or something in the 90s?
Eldorado.
Why
do you know this, Maynard? Why do you know this?
Because I was in the UK in the 90s on a tube, and someone said Scotland gave the England television with John Logie Baird or something like that, and all that England's given us is El Dorado.
Right, okay.
So it was used as a punchline back then, and it's stuck in my head as being perhaps the worst television show ever on English TV.
It's got to be pretty much up there, but I love the fact that you still use it as a punchline 20 years later when nobody recognised it at the time. So not only is this an obscure reference, it's a massively dated obscure reference.
Well, there you go. Okay. What would you use apart from Emmerdale as one that's maybe it's got that they tried it and it was really bad and everyone recognises it as a recent failure on English TV?
Oh God, a recent failure. You know, I think so much of English telly is a massive failure. This is the problem. I don't think we're not trying to do anything interesting. We're not trying to tell stories. We're just trying to sort of pump stuff out. So unless you're watching something on BBC4, which tends to do reasonably well, anything that's on the mainstream channels is pretty dire. All the decent telly is coming from America. I'll still hold my hands up to that. You know, things like you've got your House of Cards, your Boardwalk Empire, Sopranos are still peerless. I think I only ever watch American television.
And so the secret shame is that you didn't tell them last night. You never got around to telling them that you don't care for Doctor Who all that much.
Don't say it. Don't say it out loud, Maynard. I've lost so many fans, but I don't want to be lynched on the way out. Yes, I don't like Doctor Who. Yes, I've never seen an episode. Don't tell anyone. That's just embarrassing.
So you're also not a fan of the work of Shatner?
I've got a grudging admiration for Shatner based on his cover of Common People, which is for me, that is the absolute heights that anyone has ever achieved in any type of work ever created.
Oh, great.
My name's Carrie Poppy.
Hi, I'm Steve Colgan.
This is Richard Saunders.
Hi, George Robb here.
I'm Jane Novella.
I can tell you what I hate about QED. What I really hate is that it comes to an end each year.
QED, for me, is just a wonderful opportunity to hear lots of speakers.
Hearing the crunch of 350 people purposely and simultaneously overdosing on homeopathic pills for the 1023 event was a sound I will never forget.
It's simply one of the better skeptical conventions anywhere in the world.
And you're asking me what I think of QED. I haven't been to QED.
And also, because it's such a personable event, to actually meet quite a few of these people for the first time.
Because you will meet many, many fun and interesting people. You will see great talks by some of the best thinkers. And you'll also meet people who have a drive and a passion for making the world better by protecting people and not being dicks about it.
You know, right down to people who I maybe wouldn't have heard of without QED.com.
I would be an epic guest because I could speak in a flawless British accent. Hello, everyone. Like that. And everyone would be like, who is this English guy? Are you inviting me? Because I'd love to go.
QED 2015, April the 24th to the 26th in Manchester, England. 12 main stage speakers, 8 panels, 3 comedians, and 500 friends, and a massive party. Tickets are £99 or £69 for students for the weekend, including the Saturday night. www.qedcom.org to get your ticket. Hurry, it's in April.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. In the next week, I hope to visit my old friend Eugenie Scott and maybe visit a few scientific places around the San Francisco Bay Area before jetting off home. Yes, a very quick trip this time around. Thank you to those people who have just recently subscribed to the Skeptic Zone via PayPal at www.skepticzone.tv. Your little weekly contribution, micropayment they call it, means that the show continues. Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you enjoy listening to The Zone and it means something to you and you get something out of it, maybe you would think that $1 a week or less, actually, it's 99 cents a week, is worth it for you to keep listening to the show. It's much appreciated, and it means we can do skeptical investigations. I can buy equipment for the reporters and so on. And it's nice to buy Maynard lunch. Anyway, for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the San Francisco Bay Area, California.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.